Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's On the Sofa. As you can see, I've had a different perspective tonight. I'm doing on the sofa. So tonight we have Jerel Ifil with us. So thank you very much, Jerel, for joining us. We'll get you on in a second. Just a couple of things. Hereford tomorrow night, friendly. And we want to say our best wishes to Reece Devine, who looks like he's going to be out for the season with hamstring, which isn't good news for him. So all the best to him. Okay, let's bring Vic on.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Vic.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
All right. Thank you very much indeed. Still celebrating Somerset's success on Saturday in the T20 at Edgbaston. A long day, but a magnificent day. So there we are. I've got some SAS travel news for you as well. They're open from 7 o'clock tomorrow night on the phones only, taking bookings for Colchester, the opening league game, of course, and Peterborough in the League Cup. Limited spaces only for those two, but a reserve list will then be opened when those buses are full. And then they're open for phone and in-person bookings on Thursday to see how many bookings they can get possibly for another coaches on both of those games. So that's from 7 o'clock tomorrow night. And hopefully we can put the phone number up at the bottom of the thing like we did last week, Chris, can we?
I did. We certainly can. Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. And also Forest Green and Wrexham tickets are not on sale at the moment, and so of course coach bookings won't be able to be taken until after the match day tickets are on sale. So don't be ringing Mark asking if you can book for those. Okay, so let's bring on Jerel.
Evening.
Good evening.
How are you? You okay?
I'm good. How are you?
Not bad.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay, so any questions for Jerel, please leave in the comments, and I will see you later.
Chris, thanks very much indeed. Jerel, thank you ever so much for joining us this evening. Great pleasure to talk to you. It was a great pleasure to watch you play on many, many occasions. So it's good to have your company. And you might notice behind me there are 4 shirts that not these shirts that you wore, but similar to the ones that you wore whilst you were at the town. So I put them up in your honour for this evening. So there you are.
Thank you.
It was always football for you, wasn't it? You were born in Wembley, I believe, which, if you're going to be born somewhere as a footballer, you might as well be born in Wembley, mightn't you?
Yeah, well, I was actually born in Willesden, but it was I was born in a hospital near there, put it that way. But I grew up in Willesden. But Wembley was literally about a 10 minute drive from where I was. I could see the Twin Towers from my house. Where I grew up from the upstairs. So yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of things that kind of pointed me towards football. I held the flags at Euro 96 when I was about 13. So I've got the video of me behind David Beckham, Paul Ince, Tony Adams, as I'm holding one of I think it was the England flag I was holding.
Wow, was that for all the Euro 96 games at Wembley, or just
all of them? Yeah, all the England games. So I think the one that I've got is when England played Switzerland. That's the video I have. So I believe Ramon Vega was in that one, and I played with Ramon Vega for a stint when he was at Watford, when I was breaking through. It's crazy.
That's crazy indeed. I mean, wow, that must be a fabulous memory to have, especially that night against Holland when England destroyed them on that. That was something special, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was amazing. That was a great performance as well. Definitely by Paul. I remember Paul Ince playing really, really well on that one as well. And he was like my idol at the time. So
goodness me. What memories? I mean, you got a video of it. You got any more? You must have taken pictures, or people must have taken pictures. Do you get any souvenirs from it apart from a flag? Did you get any shirts, anything like that?
No, because we only ever held the flags at the beginning, and it was all a rush. It was like the national anthems would go on, and then we'd have to rush off, and then the game would start, and then we'd have to get to our seats and all stuff like that. So the only thing I did do is I snuck a camera on my neck. And as I was running off, I managed to get 2 in-focus pictures. And that was David Beckham running past, and he smiled for me. And then the other one was Paul Ince, but he wasn't really paying that much attention. But that was the only 2 that came out.
Well, they're pretty good too to have, and of course Paul Ince famously played for Swindon for a couple of times later on.
Yeah, it was like my idol coming to play with me, and obviously he was not as he wasn't the person that he was. So I was a bit like, I wish I never saw that. I just wanted to keep him in memories.
We remember him pointing a lot.
Yeah.
Well, what memories to have. I mean, your brother, of course, was also a professional footballer. So, you two kids would have played football a lot when you were younger, wouldn't you?
Yeah, funny enough, it was my birthday the other day, and my brothers, they came around. So my little brother or the middle brother, he was at Tottenham Hotspurs. And then my littlest brother, he's about 11 years younger than me, he was at Arsenal. So my brother, the one that was at Tottenham, he was at Tottenham before I even got to Watford. So he was always like the shining star of the family. And, rightly so, he was amazing at that age. So I was always trying to get into the game still, even though I got in probably about 16 years old. 15/16 years old in that season. And we had a funny conversation there because we had all family around, and some of the people were like, well, who's the better brother then? Who's this? Who's that? It was the funniest conversation. But I concede. I was the athlete. He was the baller.
I was going to say you weren't competitive at all then in any way.
It's a crazy family dynamic because we are very competitive, and because we don't see each other that often now. For all of us to be in the same place, it just started straight away, and then everyone's asking, "Dad, what do you think?"
Well, your dad was quite influential, wasn't he? Because I mean, you used to play football in the park, didn't you? And so, I guess a lot of that sort of rubbed off as you in later life. Because we've all played football in the park. We're all crazy about playing football in the park. How was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, he just bought a goal for us, and it was a small goal, but it was enough for us we used to do crossing and shooting, we used to do heading, we used to do everything in there, but he used to just pass the ball to us and make sure we could do certain things. And yeah, it was a way of bonding, and at the same time it was feeding something that my dad never got. So my dad didn't get pushed. He was good at football, but didn't get pushed. So when you're from kind of like the West Indian culture, they don't see that as a viable way of making a living, and to a degree it's right, because only about 0.1% of people that try and play football actually make it as footballers. So I get it, but he wanted to make sure that if we had a passion, that he would help us follow it. And luckily, for myself and my brother, we were able to make a living out of the game. Yeah,
fabulous. Great that your dad supported you like that. Lots of messages coming in already. Yeah, fair play. Yeah, mustn't leave mum out of it, obviously. Yeah. Brad Lane says, Beast, Jerel Ifil, your nickname, of course. We'll get onto that and how you got that later. Malcolm says, it was a pleasure to meet you at the charity game, Jerel, and thanks for the memories of playing in Swindon colours. True gent and a legend. Hi, James. James says, does Jerel stay in contact with ex-Swindon players? We'll ask that a little later. Oh, and Malcolm says, thanks very much indeed for signing my shirt. So you're already getting some good messages coming in. People remember you fondly from your time. But let's go back how you joined Watford, because that was your first club, wasn't it? How did that come about?
So I was playing for Hendon at the time, so non-league, but I was an under-18 playing at about 15 years old. So I was in the under-18s team, but I was 15. So I was playing above my age. A couple of the managers, so the reserve manager and the manager of my team, were saying I was good enough to play at a higher level. They knew someone who could get me a trial at Watford. And so then they started having an argument about me playing, because I was playing a lot for the reserves and for the under 18s, and they kind of fell out, and then nothing happened. And then my dad kind of pulled them up on it and said, look, you guys are, messing around about, where Jerel should be playing. And then you said he was going to get this trial, and none of you have acted on it because you're being quite petty. And then they kind of followed through after that, and I got the trial, and it was meant to be a 2-week trial. And then after 2 days, they told me I wasn't good enough. But my manager, they didn't tell me, they told my manager of the under 18s, whose son was also on trial. They told the manager forgot to tell me, but he did tell his son, because his son got told he wasn't good enough as well. and I went back the next day. It was just a thing of not doing the things I was good at that time. When you haven't been in a professional environment, there are certain things, you know, the technicalities of the game and all the, you know, I would say like the flash stuff, the keepy uppies and all this kind of stuff, which they were exceptional at, and I was just good at, if you know what I mean. So obviously I'm not going to be able to go in there, and I was nervous as well, go in there and do all these little tippy tappy things, and all I've been doing is playing football with men or older kids, and I was able to read the game well. I was strong, I was fast, I could jump high. So for me, it was about the defending. I saw that as kind of an art, and I didn't have an opportunity to do that in those first 2 days. Well, luckily on the third day, they played a match with their older under 18s and young pros, and I was able to show what I was good at, because I, you know, kept one of their best strikers quiet and stuff like that. And without really knowing that, they told me not to come back. They, you know, arm around me. Do you want to come to, I believe it was Norway, on a summer tournament? And by the time I finished the tournament, they signed me.
Incredible. How would you have dealt with the fact if you had been told you weren't good? I mean, it's a crushing blow for a lot of young people, isn't it? That they think they're going to make it at football, and then they're told that they're not at that early age. How would you have dealt with that, do you think?
Well, it's a hard one, because I'm going to answer it as an adult, if that makes sense. So, you know, for me now, I have a lot more wisdom. You know, I've had the career now. If they told me at the time that I wasn't good enough, I probably would have kept trying, because I was at Tottenham prior to that, and prior to that, I was playing for my borough. And when I was like 12, 13, I got scouted by Charlton, QPR, and Arsenal. And you know, you never know what could have happened if I actually went back. I left my borough the year after, and actually Arsenal came back for me, but I wasn't there. So sometimes you miss opportunities and you keep going, and that's what happened at Tottenham. You know, they played me a year above. I did well, and then they didn't sign me on YTS forms. That was when you're old enough to have the YTS, the first year. So I missed the first year YT, and I ended up going in the second year with Watford. So I had the attitude to keep trying, but I was also creating a back door for myself, which was sports therapy. So I was thinking about going into sports therapy as my backup. So I had that there. I'd been accepted into college for the September, but I was able to get signed in the summer, so I didn't have to go to college, which was lucky. Apart from going with Watford, so I had to still go and do sports studies or sports science, I believe it was. Sure,
because I would imagine in London, the competition to get, you know, there are a lot of boys playing football, aren't there? So how tough is that competition when you're playing at a local, if I might use that phrase, when you're playing for your borough? There must be a lot of talented young kids about.
Yeah, there are loads. I mean, and that's what it was seen as. You know, when you used to play, you know, if you were a London team or you were the London Borough of Brent or whoever it was, you know, you were always seen as the cream of the crop, even from outside, because it's the cities that have a majority of the demographic of kids that want to play football. And then London is obviously the most densely populated area. So you had to be quite strong, quite tough, mentally as well, because there was an element where I'm from, you know, there is a kind of, it's like street football. You know, if you get embarrassed, people take the piss out. Excuse me, I'm not allowed to swear. Take liberties out. So they will say stuff, or, you know, it's all that kind of ridicule, and it's part of the banter, but it can get you. They try and get in your head, so you've got to be strong enough to deal with that as well.
So do you use that later on when you become a professional, the ability to be able to deal with that? Because, you know, if you have to be strong mentally when you're playing amongst kids who are taking the mickey out of you all the time, do you use that later?
Yeah, I believe you do. You just got to take it. You have to use it in the right way, though. So when I got into football, it was almost like I felt like, because I got into it quite late, I was always trying to prove myself to people. You know, everyone would say, "Oh, you're quite raw," you're quite this, you're quite that, you're not quite the refined product and all of this kind of stuff. Whereas when people let you play and believe in you, you can relax a little bit. But I felt in most of my career, I was always trying to prove something. And in my early parts of the career, that's kind of what led to the red cards, the yellow cards, because I took it quite personally when people were trying to get past me. I felt like they were trying to take my whole career away from me. So it was like, this guy's not doing that, but I'd then do it by getting sent off or acting quite brashly. And, you know, it dissipates as you get older, but it's always there. There's always a niggly little thing that's there. But that's just part of it. That's part of how you become an adult at the same time as a more mature footballer. And, you know, you deal with things in better ways. And sometimes it's too late. Sometimes you're able to learn.
Yeah, sure. Well, we all do that in life, don't we? We might talk about one or two notable red cards later, if that's okay with you.
Yeah,
Nottingham Forest springs to mind, and no doubt you'll start to come out in a cold sweat as soon as I mention that one. So at Watford, then you go on loan to Huddersfield and you make a handful of appearances there. But then this sort of long saga involving Swindon Town and loans and transfers and things starts to happen. Andy King takes notice of you. So when did you first learn about Swindon's interest?
I believe it was, I think I came in the back end of a season, didn't I? I think. So there was
January 2003.
Yeah, so that was to help with the promotion push, I believe it was, the playoff push. And I just came in, I was quite green at that time, you know, just came in and just played wherever he wanted me to play. I just wanted to prove myself, really. And obviously I became quite well known here, or people liked my style of play or wherever it might have been. And then obviously Andy King wanted me to come back again and again. So I believe 3 loan spells. And then at the same time, I think Watford went into money trouble. So they started deferring bonuses, wages and things like that. And that's how I ended up signing. It's because at first they didn't want to sell me. Because I did well at Swindon. I did well at Huddersfield. I signed a 3-year deal. But then the money troubles came because that was at the time Vialli and Ray Wilkins were the managers. So it actually was Ray Wilkins and Vialli that put me on that 3-year deal. So they saw a lot of potential in what I potentially could be. But they spent a lot of money in their first season, and in the second season they didn't keep him on. And funnily enough, in that year, in that pre-season, he said to me that he wanted to build the defence around me that year. And then he got sacked about 2 weeks later. So it's unfortunate, is what it is. Things may have been a bit different if things didn't change, but it is what it is, man. You can't change the past.
No, it's actually, I was looking through your Swindon career, and I made it. You played under 5 managers: Andy King, Ify Nora, Dennis Wise, David Byrne, and Danny Wilson. So, I mean, playing under different managers is part and parcel of the game, isn't it?
Yes. It's you know, and it's one of those things. You're always proving yourself to people. So if you add that, and you know, I've analysed my personality as I went through my career and where I could have been better and where maybe I feel like the luck would have been better. And unfortunately, when you're slightly insecure in the game and then you keep having to prove yourself to different people, it takes a toll. You don't grow in the same kind of way as if you are, you know, a young person who's been believed in the whole time, and they're not almost making out like you're lucky to be there. You know, sometimes, like, so if I look at my brother, for instance, right? So he was playing throughout the England setup. He was at Tottenham from the whole time. The way people looked at him was with a belief that he was going to be this giant in the game in the Premier League. And that gave him a great belief system. And even to this day, he believes in himself, regardless of what he's doing. So with me, I always felt like I was climbing, trying to get there and holding on. So sometimes the outlook. And so I'm happy I had a career because I felt like I was always holding on to that career. You know, so, you know, things just, they don't go always as you expect. And then you learn from it to hopefully help other people. That's
Well,
what you want to do.
it's fascinating to hear you say this because, you know, those of us who watch football, we always think professional footballers are fully confident and all this kind of thing. And now, of course, with the more being talked about mental health, we're finding out, you know, we look at footballers as heroes, but you know, you're a human, aren't you? You're the same as anybody else. You have the same insecurities, all that kind of stuff. Was there any help in those days to help you with those insecurities? Did football clubs help you?
No, not in those times. And I think people have become more aware of, and it was developing, don't get me wrong. So I could see the effort was being made to help the mental aspect of the game, but not necessarily your mental well-being. So sports psychology, for instance. So sports psychology was all about, you know, visualizing winning and how you see the game ending up. Or there was like hypnosis, which they were trying to get us to do at the time as well. So I could see that they were paying more attention to it, but helping you feel good in yourself, they didn't understand yet. And I believe now it's better. But it can go both ways, because if there's too much help, then sometimes you don't know how to become strong in yourself, because you're always trying to offer to other people. So there's a balance that you need to kind of find within yourself, where knowing that you're not taking yourself beyond what you can cope with, and also finding a way to have some resilience. I think that's where the balance is, and that's why you'll still get some that struggle and some that will flourish.
Sure, and I'm guessing that dressing rooms are pretty macho, aren't they? I mean, people don't show their feelings in there very much.
No, I mean you're putting on a mask at the end of the day. One is, although these are all your teammates, there's, you know, probably about 20% of them is your competition. So you again, you're working in this kind of weird environment where you're all for each other, but you're not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, it makes sense. Yeah, I mean, there are other people wishing to take your food off the table, in effect.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and so you're always kind of, it's not their fault, it's not your fault, it's just the nature of the game. And you know, you spread that out to jobs and relationships and all that kind of stuff. There's always someone that's willing to take what you have, and you just got to accept it for what it is. But you can't show too much weakness, you know. So you know, even if you're hurt in a game, it takes a lot for someone to show they're hurt, you know, in a game. You know, I've played with many injuries and stuff like that, or tried to play with them, and then your body goes, nah, you're not doing that no more. And it doesn't matter what your brain thinks, you know. So yeah, I would say that you don't give too much away in a dressing room. You're always trying to show the strongest version of yourself.
Sure, because the last thing you want to do is knock on the manager's door and say, I can't play on Saturday because I've got this or that or the other, because there's somebody else willing to come in and take your place, isn't there?
Yeah, and also the older school managers would see that as weakness. So they'd look at you like, you know, even if you're injured, you know, they'd ignore you for a little while, you know, because you're not used to them. So it's like, well, you know, you don't get injured on purpose, but it is what it is, you know. So, you know, even when I fractured my back when I was like 18, and it was like stress fractures, and no one could find out on X-ray or MRI scan why I kept on pulling up. So I came off in a reserve game, and I couldn't sprint because my nerves were catching in the crack. Ooh. And it was sending shooting pains down my leg, but I could jog. So I was like able to jog, but as soon as I tried to sprint, it would just literally send shooting pains right down to my toes. And they're like, what's the matter? I'm like, I don't know, I can't sprint. So I can walk off, but I can't sprint. And, you know, because the X-rays didn't show much and the MRIs didn't show much, or they didn't show anything, when I got to a certain level of recovery, they were expecting me to be able to sprint again. I'm like, I still can't sprint. So then they start looking at you like, is he putting it on? Do you not got what it takes to become a footballer? This, that, and the other. So they start looking at your attitude. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on here, but there's definitely something wrong. And, you know, finally I had a CT scan, I believe, the one where you have the dye injected into your body, put you through this giant cylinder. And it showed I had 3 stress fractures. And I was so relieved, because people started to think there was something in my head. So, you know, I was getting ignored. There was only one physio that was actually paying them attention, because everyone else started to not give me at first it's like, you're right, how's things going? Getting ready, getting back to training. And then eventually after about 2 months, it's like, they ignore you and you're like, ugh, it's horrible to be ignored, for anyone really.
Sure. Yeah. And did that, I mean, you mentioned, you weren't able to sprint, but did that play on your mind at all? Because obviously if you knew that when you later after you sort of recovered from that, did that play on your mind? Because it might, if you're going to get the shooting pain in your legs when you sprint, or did you get over that? Did you recover from it?
No, I was happy. As soon as I was able to sprint, I was just relieved. I was like, yeah, right, back to business.
Yeah.
You ain't got really time to dwell on that. I just wanted to prove myself. And I think the management changed as well in that period. So I was able to start fresh because I had to stay off for the whole back end of the season because I was off total about 4 months because they said there's no actual healing process other than just letting the bones heal.
Yeah, sure.
So, I stayed off and then was able to go back to pre-season fresh. So it was like almost a new start. So it was okay.
Good to know. Your time at Swindon, of course, my goodness me, the club has been through the mill several times. I mean, you were there at some pretty turbulent times too, weren't you? What are your memories of those sorts of times? Because we spoke to Ifil and Nora last week about those things. I mean, financially, the club was always in trouble, it seemed, that it wasn't a clear path forward. Ifil lost his job after taking over from Andy King. Dennis Weiss comes in. Boy, it's a time of change, isn't it, when you were there?
Yeah, I mean, I was a young pro at that time, so it didn't benefit my growth because you can only grow in stable environments in a positive way. In unstable environments, it depends on your resilience. But you're normally just getting through things rather than learning, and I believe from Andy King leaving until Dennis Wise coming, there was just so much uncertainty in the club. So you never really knew what was going on. I wasn't fit enough at that time. Our pre-season was awful. Probably the most unfit I ever was. And as a young pro, you don't want to be unfit because that's kind of what you rely on when you don't have experiences. You need to at least be fit and strong. And then unfortunately when managers come and go, now all you're doing is trying to prove yourself again, but you're not really getting better because you're in a bad position and you're not getting the coaching you need. Ifil Nora came in, that was his first kind of managerial job, so everyone was quite green. I was green, he was green, a lot of the team were not, we hadn't gelled, we weren't playing as a team. So, it was, part of me was like, what the hell have I done? I've just left a secure club because they'd finally sorted themselves out. And I've gone to a club that, I think we were relegated by the time in the first season, I believe it was, that I got my permanent deal. So it was a bit of a shock. I was hoping to be in the Championship and the next minute I'm in League Two.
Yeah, sure.
So,
yeah, I mean, that season, of course, it was finished at a 1-1 draw at Bristol City, which finally confirmed the relegation. And I've got to mention the Nottingham Forest game in that season. You'll remember it well. All of us, you got sent off. All of us who were there wish we'd got sent off too. What are your memories of that moment?
What, of being sent off?
Yeah.
I don't remember too much. I was just frustrated. I don't store bad memories that well. I try and erase them. As long as I learn something from them, I will literally push them to one side. So funny enough, I watched the highlights of that a few weeks ago just to kind of, I don't know what I was doing.
Self-punishment, probably.
Yeah, I think I'm punishing myself, it's like, what, I'm having a bad day, just look back. But yeah, I see myself and I don't even recognize that version of myself, if that makes sense. I was a lot more of an emotional player at that time. I know that although we are in the spotlight, there was more to it than that. So it wasn't too personal. For me, it was like that was a bad time for the whole team and for the whole club.
Sure.
So these things happen, and being an emotional player, which I was at that time, it was inevitable.
Yeah. As I say, many of us would wish you got sent off as well from your way end that day. It was a nightmare, wasn't it? But what were your strengths, do you think? I mean, obviously, trying to deal with different managers. Dennis Wise comes in. I think he partnered you at the back with A.D. Williams, if I remember rightly, and things like that. It seemed to be okay, didn't it? That was a decent start to the season for you as well under Dennis Wise.
Well, it's funny because I'm a player that likes to be treated fairly. I don't need special treatment. I just need fair treatment, right? So when Dennis Wise came in, it was the first time in a while where I felt I was being treated fairly, right? So he gave me a clean slate. He said, look, the chairman's trying to get rid of you. He doesn't think you're any good. So he's quite honest with me. Obviously, based on the statistics, they could get rid of me quite easily. But he said, I've watched your games, and he said, your biggest weakness is you do everyone else's job and you don't do your own. All right. So he said, you're always running somewhere. Right? He said, you're sprinting the right back, you're chasing back the left back side, you're trying to cover your other centre back. You go into midfield, you do everything everyone else should be doing, and that leaves you not able to do your own job. So he said, what I want you to do in the pre-season games is I just want you to stick in your job. He said, if someone else is not doing their job, we'll let them worry about that and we'll talk to them about it. So what I found is I just simplified my game. I stayed where he told me to stay. And although AD was next to me, I was there to help him as well because he didn't have the legs like he used to. So what they said to us is, look, one of you cover, the other one go up for the heads. And then that's it. You just work as a partnership. And that worked well for him because he could see that I was helping him to actually, he wasn't getting exposed because I was there. And then for me, I could jump in header anyway, but it just made more sense for him to go up for the headers and me to cover. And that was that. The midfielders had to do their jobs, which was, if the ball goes out to right back, centre back shouldn't be going out there, centre midfielder. That's why they got the engines to do that. You go and cover and you help and you do what you need to do. Let the spine of the team stay where it's supposed to be, and that's in the middle. And my game was just so much more easier. I didn't find myself sprinting as much. And when I did need to sprint, I was always in a good position. So I wasn't always hung out to dry by myself. And by the end of that pre-season, he said, I can't get rid of you. He said, you're my best defender. So to go from being told if you don't prove yourself, we will get rid of you kind of thing, to I'm not going to get rid of you because you're our best defender. I got player of the season that year, even though the Swindon Advertiser gave it to Lee Peacock. He didn't win it, just saying. I got the trophy, but they made it, and I just couldn't be bothered to argue it. But that was one of those things. I felt fairly treated, and with Dennis Wise and Gus Poyet, they treated everyone with a level of fairness. And they just laid it. They were honest. That's just how it was.
So, from what you're saying, then, football can sometimes be overcomplicated. Is that fair to say? That the game is overcomplicated. If you know what your game is, if you're told what your game is as a player, and you can get that in your head, that helps you greatly in your career.
Yeah, I mean, football's a simple game.
Yeah,
right. It's a very simple game. We try and overcomplicate it and make out like this. It's like some sort of like magical tactics. It's not. If you look at some of the best teams, they do the fundamental things very, very well, and then they let the extra talent build off that. So if you get the basics right, then talent can shine. If the basics are not right, it doesn't matter how talented you are. It's like when we had Simon Cox. Simon Cox was exceptional, right? But we weren't able to thrive because the basics weren't right. Right. So he was able to shine, but it didn't help the team as much because the basics were still almost undoing some of the talent that he had. So for football, it's always about basics first and then talent comes afterwards, because you can be an exceptional talent. If you're not fit enough, if you don't do the basics right, you're not going to be able to shine, or you'll give glimpses of what you have, but it won't be consistent, and that's another part of the basics, is being consistent.
So from what you say, Dennis Wise was a great help to you, but of course Dennis Wise didn't stay there very long, did he?
No.
He went off to Leeds, and in comes Paul Sturrock. So how much of a change was that?
It was a bit of a change because Dennis Wise was like new school type of coaching. It was very player orientated. Then Paul Sturrock came in. Now Paul Sturrock is still player orientated, but he came from an older way of thinking, right? So, but for me personally, John Blackley came in and he was like the defensive coach, and he took a shine to me. He was like, you've got exceptional talent. You should be playing up here. It's about how we're going to get you there, kind of thing, right? But again, even they didn't stay that long, So it's a thing for me. The guys that believed in me didn't stay as long as I may have would have liked them to stay, if you know what I mean, for me, for my career progression. And so new people come in, you have to prove yourself again, and then it's the saga starts all over again. So part of me was the frustration of having the fair and the consistent management that I liked, and then getting what I didn't like for a majority of my career.
And how frustrating is that? Because I know you just said you put the negative thoughts to one side and you leave them alone, but I guess we all look back at certain times and say, I could have done this and could have done that. I mean, do you believe you could have played at a higher level than 3 and 4?
Yeah. When I started, I was playing at championship level, getting man of the match. I got man of the match on my debut. I got man of the match about 3 or 4 occasions of the 11 times that I played. So it's not to say that I didn't have it, or, technically I didn't have this, I didn't have that. It was just about belief in my ability. When I had people around me that believe in me, I literally, my level goes up, and then I want to do more. I become more driven. Unfortunately, I learned to be more resilient towards the back end, but I was starting to lose do I want to do this anymore? Do I still want to play the game? I was tired of the politics of the game. Again, people having favorites, people doing this. The game isn't all fun and games, if you know what I mean. So sure. I have to acknowledge, am I going to have to play until one thing I didn't want to do is play football until my legs fell off, So I had to also think of, do I love the game as much as I used to? Am I going to have to still work when I finish? And is it worth keeping going? And I got to a point where I was like, I'd rather retire with all my wits about me, my body in good condition, somewhat, and go and do something that I hopefully can do with passion beyond 35, 40 years old.
Well, we'll talk about what you do now in a minute, but it's a fascinating conversation because you're learning a lot about, you see, we all think professional footballers love playing football all the time, but of course it's not true. They have issues off the pitch. They have issues with the management. You have issues in the dressing room. You're not friendly with everybody. It's a fascinating insight into the life of a professional footballer. Do you think that we as fans don't know enough about what goes on in a football club in terms of the internal workings, if you like, of the management stroke footballer relationship, that kind of thing?
It's hard for you to know that. There's an inside knowledge that you get from being in it day in and day out, and we get paid to do that, so as a fan, you're passionate about watching, and so you have a demand which is fair. You're paying your money and you want to see minimum passion, right? Then after that, you would hope that you get a manager that can galvanize the team, has good tactics, and gets you success. The problem with success is that it's fleeting. Right. So no matter what, there can only ever be one champion out of, between 20, 24 teams. All then you're looking for is how high up can we get? If you're in that bottom half, it's normally quite bleak unless you're a team that's come up from the bottom and got to mid-table. So if you've come from League 2 into League 1 and you finish mid-table, you kind of find it acceptable. So I feel with fans, there is a demand. It's just that it's always that remembering we're all human beings, right? So it's sometimes the game overtakes humanity. So you get so passionate, you can throw stuff, you can spit, you can say the wrong things. Even for me as a black man, I've been racially abused on the pitch. So that's where we then go beyond the game, and we have to go into humanity. None of us want to feel like we're beneath anyone else. So I'm not above a fan just because I play football. I'm just a guy that's lucky enough to have played football. So I don't want to take the fans for granted. Then the other aspect is the fans shouldn't take us for granted just because we're on that pitch and we get paid, a good amount of money to play football. We are still going to have the emotions, the demand, and that's what the money is the compensation for. That is the compensation for being at a high level and being watched, and sometimes having to deal with high pressure scenarios. So
Sure.
It's important for us to always remember that we're always human beings at the end of the day.
It's incredible insight, and thank you for it. And you talk about being racially abused. I mean, how difficult is that to handle? Because it's a nonsense, isn't it? I mean, how did you find that?
It's difficult to deal with, but at the same time, you look at you give yourself comfort. I'm the one playing football. You're the one sat on the sides. So you can say what you want, but my comfort is that I'm able to do what I dreamed of doing.
Sure.
Where you're on the side, shouting off whatever you believe that might put me off my game or put my teammates off. When I was younger, it was tougher. I remember I went on tour to Italy and I got spat on. That was probably the hardest one to take because I had not experienced that before. So it was like, oh, okay, that actually happens, So I went and spoke to another couple of my teammates who were older pros who were black, and my agent was a black guy, Cyril Regis.
Nice.
So I was like, look, I'm struggling with that aspect because I really wanted to punch that guy in the face. And I don't think it was a guy. I think it was like a 16, 17-year-old kid. And I think I was 18. So to me, that would have been perfectly fine to do, but I know that I don't want to ruin any opportunities that I've literally got. I'm on tour with Watford, So I was quite reserved. I stayed quiet and I just didn't know what to do. I was away from family and stuff like that because we were on tour. And you're contemplating what just happened, and has that emasculated me because I didn't fight at the time? Should I have had a fight? I should have stood up for myself. All the little things that you second guess yourself with. And then I spoke to a few players, my agent, and they were like, "Well, we've had bananas thrown at us, we've had this thrown at us. Sometimes you've got to be resilient and you just got to deal with it." And that was at a time where it wasn't as bad as Cyril Regis days,
No.
But at the same time, it hadn't quite got to where it needed to be, and it's still not quite where it is.
No,
but again, it's all about that humanity element. That's all it is. The game, passion takes over. And if passion takes over and what you then use as a weakness is someone's color, then, you're in a bad place for yourself,
Sure.
because, color is not a weakness. It's just what you're born with.
It's absolutely. Cyril Regis, man, what a player that was.
Yeah.
Extraordinary player. I used to see him at the county ground, obviously, when he was I didn't know he was your agent, but now it makes sense that he was there when watching you. And we used to sort of say, it's Cyril Regis. I mean, those of us who were around at that era, wow, what a player that was. And we remember him with great fondness. Right. Claire says, who was your favourite manager to play for? Well, you've mentioned Dennis Wise, but it's a very difficult thing to say, really, isn't it? I guess. But who was it? Was it Dennis Wise?
Yeah, I would say for the period that he was with myself, I felt the best treated, and then obviously Paul Sturrock after that, because he allowed me to carry on playing in the style that I was comfortable playing. Apart from every so often, he was just like, look, put it in rosette, please. I was like, yes, boss, rosette.
How'd you get on with his stogies? Because that was his thing, wasn't it? Those
I love the stogies, yeah. That was a favourite of mine. So I actually started making that myself. I told my missus, I was like, right, we got to make stogies.
Fair enough.
And it actually went down quite well when I went to Aberdeen, because obviously,
yeah, sure.
When I played for Aberdeen, I was like, oh, I know what stogies are.
Fabulous. Yeah, I knew when he was manager at Plymouth as well, because I worked in Devon for a long time. So we wish him well because he's not been too well, has he? So, what a great man. Now, Malcolm says, we'll never forget that booming header for that goal against Walsall at home. And David says, one of my favourite all-time STFC moments. Now, let's move on to those positive moments, because I remember you playing at Crystal Palace in a cup tie when Swindon used to reach the third round of the FA Cup, sometimes in the distant past. You scored it, and you played pretty well as a team that day, even though you lost 2-1. Yeah. But that was your first goal, I think, for the Town, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I forgot I even scored that goal at times, because obviously I remember it gets overshadowed by the promotion goal, because obviously I don't. Sure. But yeah, again, that game in itself is like a distant memory. A lot of my career feels like it's just gone, if that makes sense. And
yeah,
so I'm having to remember a little bit more with a little bit more, I don't know, effort. All of these memories that I had, there's a lot has happened since I retired, and it's like really, really distant. But yeah, I know I scored it. I don't remember too much about it, if that makes sense.
Fair enough. But you do remember the header against Walsall, I'm pretty sure of that. Are you? You're going to say you don't, or you do?
No, again, because it's attached to such a positive memory.
Sure.
So, at the time, my wife was pregnant, I believe, with my daughter. It was the last game of the season. It was my first goal of the season. It had so much meaning to it, and again, I had a great season that year. Our defense had a great record, probably one of the best since pre-war or something like that. So I was proud of that aspect of it as well, being a defender. So yeah, I remember every aspect of that one.
I mean, it passed in the flat. I watched it this afternoon, but boy, that travelled in the back of the net, didn't it?
Yeah, it was just perfect. Everything about it, the cross from Sofiane, the timing of the run, where it ended up, the celebration was brilliant. It was, everything about it was so good.
And I guess those are the moments you live for as a footballer, aren't they? I mean, you get the day-to-day training, you get all the games that are 1-1 draws on a wet Tuesday, but those are the moments, aren't they?
Yeah, I did these memories. That's what you live for. You can ride off that. And that's what football is. You don't get much success unless you're one of the top players in the world. There's not much success you get because there's so much competition. So when you do get that element of success, I mean, we didn't even get top. We just got promoted in third place. But for us, that was like, we might as well have won it, because the feeling around the club at the time, I believe it was a very family orientated feel to the club. We were very galvanized, fans and players. Even the families were getting on really, really well. And that's quite unusual. There was just so much that was in place for us to get to that point. And you learn a lot from how you succeed and the feel of the place.
Yeah, fabulous day. Of course, Walsall went on to equalise, didn't they? But was there then a sort of a phony peace after that, a phony war, if you know what I mean? Because
it didn't matter, innit? It was such a good feeling. Like, you would have scored a goal, and then it just felt, it was like party atmosphere.
Yeah, sure, it was fabulous. Where are we? Let's have a look. Oh, Rich says, you were my hero. And the Beast, great play. Where did the Beast come from? That was from Daryl. Where did that come from? Do you know?
Yeah, I think it was Sam Parkin. So it was just the way I was training at the time. I was always taught to play as you train as you play, sorry. And so when I went to Swindon, I was always a tough tackler. I was always someone that didn't take any nonsense from people doing flash stuff. And obviously you had a few players that, when I first got into training, Sam being one of them, he wanted to score goals and that, and I'm like, you ain't scoring nothing. And I'd leave a bit on him, and then he got interviewed once and was like, oh, he's a beast, isn't he, or something like that, and then it just stuck.
Right, fair enough. I mean, how would you sum up your relationship with the Town fans? Because I seem to remember it was pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm here now. I've set up a business that helps the community in Swindon. And it could have been easier for me to do in London, but I like the feel of Swindon. It's close enough to my family that I can travel. But the reality is that I had such a good time here You know, my wife chose this house that we're living in now, and she loved this house. So, you know, my daughter was born here. My son grew up here. So there is enough positive around me to think, you know what, this was a place I could settle without being too far from my roots.
Well, you kept coming back, so you must have enjoyed it here or there. I'm in Devon, but anyway, you know what I mean by that. Sean says, thanks for playing in the Paul Caddis game. Sadly, we couldn't win. That's from the gaffer, Sean, who managed as one of the teams. I'm not sure what the score was in that game. Have you any idea what the score was?
Look, when it was 13 against 13 on the pitch,
crazy.
Let's just have some fun.
Absolutely, yeah. I was trying to do commentary on that match. It was a nightmare, I can tell you. Nobody knew it was coming on. Nobody knew it was going off. It was fabulous, but good fun. Wonderful day. So let's talk about your business that you're into now. Then, what? Because obviously, let's briefly talk about how you left. Because if I remember rightly, the last game you had in a Town shirt, although you didn't get on, I don't think, was that 5-0 defeat at Gillingham, which was pretty terrible when Danny Wilson was manager. It was a hot sunny day, but boy, a miserable day in the away end. And then you went on to Aberdeen and spent a little time up there. How was that change up in Scotland?
It was just I can't say disaster, because there were some things that went relatively well, but it just didn't go the way it was supposed to in my mind. You know, I got paid really, really well to go up there. Danny Wilson gave me his blessing that if I went on the trial and I did well, you know, he said it could be quite lucrative for you. You know, I was needing a change, because obviously having so many managers and always having to prove myself. And with Danny Wilson, he liked me as a player, but at the same time, I felt like I played better than the other centre backs prior to the start of the season. And when he chose the other two, I was like, look, you know, it's getting to a point where, you know, I'm always having to do the same thing. Manager comes in, new stuff, not new stuff, but new way to prove myself. But he never treated me badly or anything like that. It was just the same old thing happening again and again. So I was getting tired of that aspect, and I wanted to go somewhere where I'm actually wanted. And that's where obviously going to Aberdeen and playing in that trial game, they literally just was like, yeah, we want you here tomorrow. Right. So it was like, oh, wow, this is a nice feeling to actually be wanted. So yeah, I went, my family came with me, but then seeing the training and the tactics and overcomplicating the game, it was just bad. And then politics comes into it. Who's the more favorite player? Who's the more well-known player? And again, it happened very quickly, because I went there to replace an injured player. But as soon as that player became fit again, it was almost like they were itching to get him back in, regardless of how well we did as a defence. So even though we had one of the best clean sheet records, sorry, my wife just left to go gym.
Fine, no worries.
So even though we had one of the best clean sheet records in the country at the time, and we had one of the best defensive records. So we had kept a lot of clean sheets. I think it was the most clean sheets barring Rangers. And then we had the most we had conceded the least amount of goals in the league anyway, but we just couldn't win games. We was 1-0, 0-0, or losing 1-0. But it was like any little thing I did, I was on a tight string. So if I made a mistake or anything like that, they put the guy straight back in, and I was like, oh, this happened very quickly, you know. So again, manager got sacked. I'm proving myself to a manager that has no clue about me. I'm in Scotland now. You know, I think it was Craig Brown who took over, and he said, look, I don't know nothing about you as a player. I know more about the other players. He said, you know, I think you're a right back. I was like, I'm not a right back. I've never played right back, you know, but he was going to play me there anyway. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I'm 27, 28 years old, and I'm trying to change position, and they weren't paying that well either. So I said to him, look, I'm tired. I just want to go back to England and get back to my family and stuff like that, because I was missing like my extended family and stuff. And he said to me, look, I know you're a good pro. He said, I'll let you go, full payout. and if you find another club, you'll be fine. So he treated me really, really well, but it just didn't work out for me in Scotland after that.
Fair enough. Well, you played for several clubs, including Rovers, of course, Bristol Rovers, and Swindon Supermarine, which I think you kind of went to after a time out of the game, didn't you? So
yeah, about 5.
Yeah, what brought that about?
So I started my mentoring company at the Supermarine owners, the Swindon at Supermarine.
Yeah.
So obviously he knew of me. I started personal training him as well because I qualified to be a personal trainer. We got on really, really well, and he kept on jotting that. He's like giving me hints. Oh, you'd be great here. You'd be great there. I was personal training. I was like, nah, I'm not doing that no more. And then I started to miss the game a little bit. I was like, you only get one opportunity to play football in a way that your body can actually handle it. So I thought, let me get myself fit and I'll go back and play. But I struggled with semi-professional football. I just don't get the whole, I can't be a semi-professional of anything. You're either a professional or not. So it was just a contradiction of the terminology and also part-time playing and knowing what I was capable of in my prime and feeling half of that because I'm not giving it the time. I'm working and all that kind of stuff. So I just thought, you know what, I'm not enjoying it. I'll leave it there.
Fair enough. Lawrence Clark says, I remember you playing for Staines Town. So somebody saw you play for Staines. So yeah. And also, let's have a look. Claire says, what are you most proud of in football and life? Well, I guess your family is one thing you're proud of, because, boy, your family hit the high notes, if I might put it like that, in a singing sense a few years ago. So, I guess they're pretty high up, are they?
So yeah, obviously my daughter Faith. So she's a high note to a degree, because although again, fame and talent come with different negatives and positives. So there's an element of it that I want her to succeed, but there's also an element I want her to be secure in herself. And sometimes fame takes that away from you because you then start to think your talent is what makes you valuable, and it's not. You're valuable regardless. So part of it is I'm proud of that aspect, but I don't get too carried away with it, because if she's successful but unhappy, I'd rather her be unsuccessful and happy.
Sure, absolutely right. Quite.
But for my whole life playing football and finishing and doing what I'm doing now, the one thing I wanted out of life was to make sure I came out of football with my wife, or should I say my relationship, my marriage intact, right? So avoiding the pitfalls that come with football on the outside, again, with power and fame. And then just generally, being a good person, regardless of how much you have. I felt that was important. My faith was an important thing to me throughout my career, and that kept me, again, my belief system. Cyril Regis was like a spiritual mentor to me, because he was a Christian alongside myself. So that was the guidance I needed throughout my career, because he had that higher level playing experience, but at the same time we had a spiritual connection as well. So I managed to leave football with most of the important things intact, because there is, a third of footballers end up divorced, a third of footballers end up in depression, because you get the massive highs, but you also get the lows of not being adored by the fans, not playing at your maximum, and like I feel it now. I'm getting older. I can feel my body's, it can never go back to what it was, because I'm now in my 40s. So you have to find a way to accept that, and don't play as much and change the way you work out and all these different types of things. And then giving back to the community I'm proud of. So because obviously my business now helps children that are in need. So,
well, tell us what your business is then.
So what we do, the company's called iProof. So when I was coming away from football, I wanted to go into possibly some form of coaching or mentoring footballers that had talent. And I was approached by one of my friends. His name was Danny, and he had just started this business. It was really, really just literally about a few months old. and he could see what I'm about. I love family. I love, I spend a lot of time with my children and stuff like that. And he said, I think you'd be really good at, what I'm starting here. So I went and watched him. I shadowed him mentoring some children in a group setting. And it was kids that were struggling in mainstream environments. So with their behavior and they're not being suitable for an academic setting. So we were trying to use sport as a way of helping them to re-engage. And I said to him, okay, I'll do this, but we go 50-50 in the business and we just go for it. And we did. From that point on, we kind of set it up as a limited company. We had an idea of what we believe children needed in this area. And we mentor children through sport, but we've kind of modified it now because sport is not what everyone's into. No. So it's more about lifestyle and well-being and seeing the true value of yourself. And when you understand the value of yourself, you would hopefully look after yourself in a better way. And then you also understand the value of education and the value of relationships and things like that. So we've now got to a point, which I'm proud of, is we've just taken over a 5,500 square foot space in Kembury, right, where we've designed it exactly how we believe it needs to be for kids that have barriers to learning, whether that's behavior or poverty or, other barriers such as autism, ADHD, whether they've been through things like abuse. We offer kind of a high quality place for them to come to so they can see that someone's investing in them and giving them the quality they need. And that's what we've done now. We've got about 160 kids that go through our doors each week, just trying to help them really to see their value.
Well, that sounds fabulous, and we wish you all the very best with it. It's a very, incredible thing to do. And I have to say, you look as though you could probably play tomorrow, quite frankly. For a 67-year-old who's 67-year-old whose body's falling to pieces, I tell you, you look all right to me. And you're off down the gym in a minute as well, which is even more impressive, I got to say. Do you do that a lot? Is that what you do a lot?
Yeah. So obviously, being mentors, part of it is we believe you need to be accountable. So a lot of children, you tell them what they should do, but if you're not doing it, it doesn't have the same power. So obviously for me, having the career that I've had gives me a certain level of power to talk to them about how to be successful. Then also the family I have and the relationships I have, that's another form of success. But at the same time, looking after yourself and making sure that you're ready for what the world is going to throw at you. That's another element of success. So me and my son, my wife and my daughter have gone to the gym now. Me and my son will go to the gym. And so I do that 3 times a week. And then I ride with my son as well. We go riding together. So it's just trying to be accountable. And also, as you get older, the fitter you are, whatever may happen to you, it's not going to mean I'm never going to get ill. There's a possibility I could. But whatever happens, hopefully I'm in the right shape to deal with it or to get the right treatment, whatever it might be.
Well, I wish you well. Fabulous. And Chris, what a fascinating conversation to have with somebody who's known what it's like in the inside of the game and is doing something good for the world, which is great to hear. Jerel, thank you ever so much for your time.
You. No worries.
Yeah.
All right, take care.
Yeah, it's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much, Jerel. Thank you very much. So that's all for tonight. We will be back next week. We are with Andy Nicholas, and also Wayne Hatswell is going to come on after that and have a chat with us. Not necessarily about what they're doing at the moment, but how to get to know him, where he's comes from and everything like that. So get to know Wayne. Okay, there is no Monday Fool's Rush in tonight, so you can have a rest now, everybody. So we'll see you next week. Take care and see you soon. Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye. Going to be one of those that we don't want to go.